Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
We've got rather used to low inflation, or no-flation, in recent years, so you might like to brace yourself for something a little different coming up. The fall in the pound is pushing up import prices, and that's feeding through into the inflation figures. One reputable forecast from the National Institute of Economic and Social Research suggests it might hit 4% next year. Now, that 4% is best viewed as a one-off price hike, so the good news is that inflation will recede after that. The bad news is prices will stay high, and that will be a hit on living standards. Is this the Brexit bite, or will we find a way around it? Adam Parsons reports.
For hundreds of years, we've changed our notes and our coins, but always asked the same question: how far will our money take us? Well, for the past couple of years, the cost of living has barely risen at all. In fact, we've even had a brief flurry of deflation, but now prices are on the up, 1% last month. And we're told that was just the start, that inflation could hit an eye-catching 4% next year. Now, inflation works by eroding the buying power of a set amount of money. And here is a good example. This is a heavy silver ornate coin from 1887. And this was worth 4 shillings. Now, back then, we can establish that it would have bought you about £25 worth of goods using today's values. But remember, it was actually worth just 4 shillings. And in today's money, that's the equivalent to just 20p. So in the intervening 130 odd years, the buying power of a coin like this has gone down by over 100 times. Inflation has been low for years, but today's report predicts it rising sharply in the coming months. And it puts the blame for that in one place: the plunging value of the pound, which will make imported goods more expensive.
Once you get to 4 or 5%, it's something that you're going to notice. You're going to notice the price of milk or the other prices rising. So it is something that's going to hurt people. I think next year we'll be worrying for other reasons as well. There's the risk associated with the exit from the European Union, and we have to understand the responses of firms and households, which may be to rein back on investment and increase their levels of saving, all of which will already act to bear down on demand. So I'm worried for that reason. But naturally, I'm worried for people who will feel worse off in a year than they are today. That's not a good place to be.
But hold on, for years now, the Bank of England has targeted inflation of 2%. Economists have long agreed that gently rising prices are good for an economy. But still, you mention inflation and lots of us tend to shudder. So why are so many people nervous about the I word? Well, they've heard about things like this. This is a Weimar Republic 50 million mark note. Remember the hyperinflation there? Well, it was dwarfed by Yugoslavia in the 1990s. This banknote is worth 500 billion denarii. But this is the highest denomination banknote ever printed from Zimbabwe, the $100 trillion note. Now, nobody's suggesting that hyperinflation is on the way to Europe or the UK, but it's the memory of economic disasters such as this that still cloud people's thinking. We are already seeing a real-world impact of the fall in sterling. Tomorrow, the RAC will announce research showing the price of petrol rising at its fastest rate in 3.5 years. Diesel's gone up even more, and that's all because oil is sold in dollars. For those on tight incomes or getting by on limited savings, the prospect of high inflation is an unwelcome spectre.
This does look like bad news for savers, and there is this growing gap between the rate of interest they can get on their cash because of monetary policy and the standard of living costs, the inflation numbers, which are going to squeeze the spending power of the savings they've got, and it will further force savers to look at the stock market as an alternative, as the only place really they can generate meaningful long-term returns. But of course that does come with investment risk.
There has been a run of inflation forecasts recently, and 4% is the highest peak I've heard predicted, but few doubt inflation is coming back. And with it, questions that banks and households haven't had to worry about for years.
Adam Parsons there. Prison staff are warning of a crisis in the jails of England and Wales, and it seems their concerns about violence and suicide are being taken seriously. The Justice Secretary, Liz Truss, met union leaders today and is publishing a white paper tomorrow. Now, if there are two approaches to penal policy, the reformist one and the lock 'em up and throw away, the key one, potentially it seems Liz Truss is more on the reforming side. Our political editor, Nick Watt, is with me. First on the white paper, Nick, what do you know about that?
Well, that's right. We've been waiting for this. It's the big moment tomorrow. And it's interesting, as you're saying, that this takes place against that backdrop of increased violence in prison. So the big announcement you're going to get from Liz Truss tomorrow is she's going to announce that she's setting aside enough money to be able to recruit an extra 2,500 prison officers to deal with that gang violence and increased use of drugs. Now, Whitehall sources are saying this is absolutely a break with the approach of her predecessor, but one, Chris Grayling. As part of the government's deficit reduction plan, he cut the number of prison staff as the prison population increased.
Well, that's interesting. What about, though, the much broader issue about how you look upon and how you reform the prison system?
Well, if it's adios Chris Grayling, it's viva Michael Gove, her immediate predecessor. There had been an assumption that Liz Truss was distancing herself from him when she said in September she couldn't commit to his prison reform plan. Well, it turns out she's going to embrace the key elements of that, and there are two key principles. Principle number one is greater autonomy for prison governors. That will allow them to set health and education budgets so they can give prisoners what is described as purposeful activity, so they're better placed when they come out of prison, and you hope you will reduce the reoffending rate. The second element is, in return for that autonomy, there will be much greater transparency. There will be the publication effectively of league tables of prisons to identify the successful ones and failing ones. You do have to ask, why, if Liz Truss is embracing the Gove revolution, was she so cautious in September? It turns out when she turned up in that department in July, she opened the prison reform locker. It was empty because Michael Gove had been thinking of other things, the referendum.
Right. Nick, thanks very much.